The main part was that when I was getting stuck, I was getting a direct guidance from the mentor. And I think that is one of the part that impacted the most because in between, I thought my paper was ready earlier also. I guess 2 to 3 weeks. In the end of, I would say in the end of April, I would say I would have said to Animika ma'am that yeah, I think my paper is ready, but at that time she was like, no, you have that point missing, that point missing. And just for 2 weeks we have been doing formatting and all that stuff. And I think that matters a lot because when sending, I think the mistakes would be it would be rare because of that thing. So I think overall it has been a great experience. So hi, so I'm Karan. So I have made a research article on impact of short duration geopolitical events on Indian stock market returns, and I have done it on basis of evidence from the aviation sector, which is basically represented by Interglobe Aviation, known as Indigo. So going on the introduction part. So the aim of this project was to investigate the impact of short-term geopolitical wars, which were basically YRI attack in 2016 and Operation Sindoor in 2025 on the Interglobe Aviation, which is known as Indigo in India, and compare it with the overall market, which is represented by BSE Sensex, using a framework known as difference in difference, which is basically comparing the difference of difference of Indigo in comparison with BSE and how it was impacted. This study basically investigates the impact of the wars on Indigo, and that was the thing. So the goal was to examine whether short duration geopolitical events generate a shock or a different type of response in stock market when firms are directly exposed to broader market benchmarks. So telling about the background of the project. So first of all, I kind of analyze the geopolitical shocks like military conflicts or tension between various nations, and how it can increase uncertainty and alter investor expectation, because investors usually show a psychological effect what will happen, and compared and saw how financial markets got impacted, and basically there were changes in stock prices and a lot of sudden change. And then there were sector specific impact, during wars aviation sector was heavily impacted as people tend to travel less during that time. And then I kind of tried to search the existing literature on this, but most of the existing literature are mainly on larger wars or which are of a bit higher duration, like Russia Ukraine or those kind of wars, and not short duration wars like Yuri attack was for around 10 days and such wars. So for methods, I have used difference in difference, and basically I am analyzing the treated variable, which is basically 1 for interglobe and 0 for BSC. And then I am checking what is its impact post the event and before the event, and comparing the daily closing prices on basis of that. And error term is basically the uncaptured variables or other market wide influences. So the results were basically interesting since Yuri attack and Operation Sindoor both had a short-term impact, but Yuri attack had limited post-event impact, and it automatically got in the similar position than earlier very suddenly. But for Operation Sindoor, it was that reaction of stock market lasted for a bit longer duration, and BSC kind of remained stable. So the overall market was stable, but for sectoral impact there were changes and effects were visible, but they were for temporary basis and not for a very big period of time. So for Yuri attack, it can be seen that Sensex didn't fluctuate that much, but Indigo had a lot of fluctuation, and the dotted line refers to the date of the attack date. But comparing to the Operation Sindoor, it can be seen that Indigo saw very much dips, which are can be considered as major dips. So in Operation Sindoor, there were a lot of changes. So the results were that both the events were highly significant at p-value of 0.001 on the stock market. And the findings basically showed that the aviation sector, which was represented by Indigo, was much more sensitive than the overall market. And after the event, investors tend to react immediately and over the time automatically fix itself. So that was the interpretation of findings. And in relation to existing literature, it was that markets show adjustment after some time, and it supports that the short duration geopolitical events are often having a temporary reaction rather than a very big reaction. And the limitations of this was that like there were a limited number of geopolitical events, like only Operation Sindoor and YRI attack could be considered for this study, because the reason was that other events were either very long term or were representing underdeveloped market. Like there was Kargil war, but which was a short duration geopolitical event, but its data was not available considering it was pre 2000s. Then the other reason was that it focused on a single sector, and the reason for focused on a single sector was basically that aviation, other sectors were not that much developed around that time, and did not directly relate with the war that much. And like it was a very short observation window. Like events were mainly 7 days to 15 days time period. So it like that due to short duration, like a lot of impact stabilized very fast. So for future research, I think what can be done is that multiple sectors can be compared, or comparing it with multiple countries, and like have an indicator related to sentiments of investor instead of just quantitative side, and like high frequency market data. So I think that the sector specific vulnerabilities may influence the intensity of market responses even when the overall or broader market does not show that much impact. And to conclude, I think the events do influence the investor behavior and market sentiment, and the aviation sector demonstrates the greater effects than broader markets. And the effects are usually temporary and not a very long duration. And talking about the Indian markets, which were observed during the events, I think they showed like a very good recovery for both the events. And market responses do refer according to event characteristics and sectoral exposure. Like for YRI attack, it was more of secret, and for Operation Sindoor, it was kind of more open. So that's why Operation Sindoor showed higher changes. So geopolitical shocks do create uncertainty and long-term impact, but the long-term impact, considering Indian markets, is limited, which do highlight that Indian markets are kind of resilient to short-duration geopolitical disturbance.